It's AM 650's The Law Show, a comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law. Now, here's Sterling Fox.
Good morning and welcome to The Law Show here on AM 650. A pleasure to have you with us. And on today's episode of The Law Show, we're going to talk about immigration law. Our guest is Katie Van Nostrand. Katie is a lawyer at McMillan LLP in Vancouver. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out. It's good to see you.
Thanks so much for having me today.
You're an art history major who became a lawyer already. I like your story. You're a Vancouver person.
That's right. I am born and raised.
And went to UBC.
Yes.
And got a degree in art history and headed off in that general direction and then decided you didn't want to become a museum curator after all.
No, that's right. That's right. It was, I really just took art history in university because it was interesting to me. Mm-hmm. And I, going in, you don't really know what you want to do fresh out of high school. So I took a bunch of different courses.
Sure.
Had a great prof in my first year art history course, and I continued on with it. And that was what I ended up getting my degree in, Bachelor of Arts with a major in art history.
And then you took a few years off and sort of, and it didn't end up in a museum environment, but then decided for what reason to enter the law?
Well, it had always been interesting to me. I have lawyers in the family, so that, I knew what they did and sort of what the hours were like. And
almost in the DNA there.
Yes. And so because of that, I decided to apply to law school, write the LSAT, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I got in, which was great, into UBC. So I stuck around at home for a bit longer. And I had a great time at UBC Law. Taking lots of different courses, again, not really knowing the type of law that I wanted to practice, but this is fairly common.
Mm-hmm, sure, of course.
Some people know right off the bat what they're going to do, but when I speak to students now, I often tell them, no, you don't know. It'll change.
That's right.
So yeah, I thought actually that I might want to go into litigation, and that's what I started in when I first started practice law.
Now, did you go to McMillan right out of law school? Were you fortunate enough to get snapped up by that firm?
I did, yeah. We were called Lang-Mitchner at the
right,
time.
Sure, yeah.
We had a merger a few years ago, and so when I first started working with them, I was working as a summer student between second and third year law. I think it was late 2000s, 2008, and I worked there over the summer, and I was lucky enough to get hired back as an articling student. So I went back as soon as I finished law school,
right,
and did my articles there.
And then you started into litigation. You
That's
started
right.
putting on the gown and heading to the courtroom.
Yeah.
And litigating what sort of cases, or was it just the whole spectrum?
Lots of different things. I mean, we're a full-service business law firm.
McMillan's a huge firm, absolutely.
So lots of corporate commercial.
Right.
I even did, as a student, you do sort of the lower-level things just to get your feet wet.
Sure.
I did some Residential Tenancy Act disputes, so not really going to court, but helping people still that needed help with things and couldn't do it on their own.
Sure.
Some personal injury. Lots of different things.
Now, what persuaded you eventually to go into immigration law? Because, as I understand, just based on this very short description, it wasn't your first choice.
No, that's right. I didn't even take it in law school. So I think it was offered while I was there, but didn't interest me at the time. I guess I didn't really know enough about it.
Okay.
But I ended up taking over for someone who went on maternity leave. And so I took over her file load and kept up with my litigation for the year and sort of did half and half and found out that I really, really liked immigration. Much more up my alley. I'm not a very confrontational person. And to find out that you can work together with someone towards a common goal rather than fighting against someone was much more my speed.
Okay. Does the fact that we're here, and you're a Vancouver person, you grew up here, does the fact that geographically we're at the gateway to Canada make immigration law more exciting to practice because there's so much of it in Vancouver?
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's true. We do see, we're very multicultural in the city here. So I often have conversations. When I meet new people, they'll tell me that they're new to Canada or they're working here, but they're actually from a different place. And I try to restrain myself from asking them what permit they're on or if they've applied for their permanent residency. But yeah, it's very interesting because you do get lots of different types of people in Vancouver, especially.
Now, what specific specific type of immigration law do you zoom in on most frequently then?
Most of what I do surrounds work permits and entrance visas to work in Canada. I work mainly on the employer side, so I work for larger companies, most of them in Vancouver, but some right across the country, who have lots of employees working for them, and sometimes they can't find enough people or the right person to do a job where they're only looking for Canadians or Canadian permanent residents.
Right, and we're seeing examples of that here in BC. There's this whole thing going on about the proposed LNG mega project that's going to happen down the road here in BC, and they say they're going to need foreign workers, which has a lot of Canadian workers scratching their heads going, hey, wait a second, what about us? Do you find that there's a bit of a backlash against some of the people that you assist bringing into the country?
There is, definitely. I mean, we've seen that in the last year, absolutely. There has been a lot of media around, large numbers of foreign workers either coming in to do jobs in Canada or foreign workers who come in to train in Canada and then go elsewhere to do the work and are potentially being paid at a lesser wage. And because of that, the government, Service Canada has really tightened up the reins on how easy it is to get a foreign worker to come and work in Canada.
Right.
They've really changed the rules quite a bit in the
Well,
last year.
we'll talk about that. I think, though, it's probably important to recognize, Katie, just in the interest of fair play, that while we are challenging in many cases the presence of foreign workers in our midst, particularly large numbers of them, if you were to go to an oil or gas field anywhere else on the planet, you would discover dozens, if not hundreds, of Canadians. It's a two-way street, isn't it?
That's right. That's really true. And I mean, it really depends on where you are in the country. In Vancouver or one of the other large metropolitan cities, Montreal, Toronto, you might not be able to find enough very specialized high-level workers to do a job. But if you go to the oil sands, as you mentioned, or some other smaller town, if they have an industry there, forestry or oil or whatnot, mining, most people are going to want to work in the higher paying jobs in those industries.
Sure.
And you may not be able to find someone to be the cashier at the grocery store or the gas jockey. And that's often where you find the need for foreign workers in those smaller communities.
I wanted to ask you about a subject that's come up in the papers in the past week or two, and this is the feds moving the goalposts, for lack of a better way of describing it, Katie. The government of Canada has changed the investor immigration category. They've essentially shut it down, or have I misread that?
No, that's right. You're exactly right. They had actually shut it down just over a year ago to sort of take stock because there had been so many applications. They couldn't get through them fast enough.
Right.
And we all sort of, we meaning the immigration lawyers across the country, kept thinking that they were going to open it up again. We just didn't know when that was going to be. And then yes, with the budget discussion, fairly recently, they've decided to cut the program completely. And not only are they cutting it, but they've got somewhere in the realm of 40 to 60,000 applications that they're just going to be sending back with refunds.
Oh, so the system is already jammed and it's just going to be empty, flushed out, so to speak.
That's right.
So a lot of people are who have been sort of counting and playing by the rules, take a number, get in line. It's a tedious process on a good day, isn't it?
It is.
And a lot of those people are going to be just disappointed.
It takes a really long time, especially with permanent residency citizenship, when you're applying for any one of those, and really sometimes with some of the work permits that I apply for people. It can take quite a long time, and it's really, I'm sure, very frustrating for these people to all of a sudden see that they're not going to get anywhere. They've got to try a new route, start again.
Right, so that's one major change that I think everyone in the country is at least aware of. That's a category that's been around since the 80s and the Brian Mulroney era, when a lot of us, took exception to the fact that the Canadian citizenship was suddenly available for under $500,000. And I personally tend to think that's we're really shortchanging ourselves here. We're a lot better than that. So, but then this is a category though that has over the years, because it's been in effect for decades, has produced quite a number of successful immigrant entrepreneurs, hasn't it?
That's right, it has, yeah. And I mean, even with this program closing, the government has been talking about opening up some other programs sort of in the similar vein,
Right.
investing in Canada in certain ways so that you can eventually gain your permanent residency and then citizenship. They haven't announced what those programs are going to be yet, but apparently they're coming later this year. The other options for people, depending on where you want to live, most provinces have what they call a provincial nominee program.
Right.
Where you can, again, invest and either start up your own business or take over someone's business. Sometimes it's specific to where you are in the province. Certain ones in BC, for example, you can't open a business, let's say, right in the Lower Mainland. It has to be out a ways because they want more people
developing
moving.
in the other parts of the province.
That's right.
Interesting stuff. Now, all of this, the moving of the goalposts, as I've suggested the feds have just done, all these provisions that you're talking about with respect to individuals and the qualifications or the categories, the criteria they have to meet in order to become Canadians or even land. Do we have landed immigrants anymore or do we have permanent residents?
Permanent residents.
So that landed immigrant is now old school gone.
That's right. Although they still do use the term every once in a while. When you are given your permanent residency confirmation letter,
right,
you have to go for your landing interview, they still call it. So you have to go in and land at the border or inland if you're not able to go to a border.
Interesting.
So somewhat still there, but for the most part it's permanent residency.
But the whole immigration and basically the entire subject of the rest of this conversation is going to be about IRPA.
Yeah.
What is IRPA?
That's right. Yeah, IRPA is the Immigration, Refugee and Protection Act.
That's the federal statute that governs all immigration to Canada?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And there are regulations that go along with that. So IRPAR, we often refer to them as. And the two go hand in hand to basically just talk about who can come and work in Canada and who can't,
right,
how long someone can stay here, that sort of thing.
Right. And, of course, then there are family contingencies as well, depending on the type of permit that you're entering the country would determine whether or not you can bring family members with you. And if you achieve permanent status, then can you bring other relatives over? I mean, it's really quite a huge category, isn't it?
No, it really is. That's the legislation that governs everything. It's also what the Canada Border Services Agency officers will look to help determine whether someone can come in to the country or stay in the country.
Okay. So if you're just casually entering Canada as a tourist, you don't need, generally speaking, suppose you're from America, you don't need a visa, you don't need any paperwork. A personal ID would be handy, but that's about all you need, right?
Yeah.
And our border people are going to want to know if you've got any what? Fruits with seeds in them and guns. Otherwise, welcome to Canada, hope you brought lots of money. And that's about it, isn't it?
For the most part, that's right. I mean, they're one of the main things, if they're at all suspicious, they might ask you if you're coming here for business purposes at all.
Right.
Are you going to be working here? Are you just going to meetings? That sort of thing. And that's going to tip off the officers as to whether you might be working illegally. Does this person need a work permit? Do we need to look into this? Or are they really only coming to, go to Vancouver Island for a holiday?
Okay.
You just don't know. And so those are all the types of questions that they're going to ask when you come across the border.
Right.
There are certain countries in the world, though, where if you're a citizen of that country, you do need a visa.
Right.
To
Mexico
enter the country.
being one of them. The three amigos just got together a few weeks ago, and the Mexicans still very unhappy with our visa requirements, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah. It's I keep thinking that maybe they're going to change it in the future, but it's this is just my own thoughts. There's no talk of it that I know of, but yeah, there are quite a number of countries. I mean, most of the European countries, the U.S., Australia, generally those countries you don't need a visa to enter the country.
Right.
But there are quite a few countries, China, Russia, Portugal, I think, is one of them, if I remember correctly, Mexico, where you do need to have a visa to enter Canada.
You mentioned the subject moments ago of whether or not someone might be here working illegally. Our neighbors to the south in America are very upfront about the illegal immigration problems they have because they number people in the millions. Do we have an illegal immigration problem in Canada?
That's a good question. from my line of work, I think that there may be a lot of people who outstay their welcome here,
Okay.
and maybe continue to work with either without renewing their work permit because they don't want to, or it's too expensive, or their employer doesn't remind them that they need to, that sort of thing. I think you do probably get a number of people who do that, but it's not something that I see on a daily basis because, of course, I've only got the employers who think, oh, I've got to do this so that I stay in the clear.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
and you're acting on behalf of people who really want to get it right.
That's
because
right.
there's a lot at stake to bring the right person in to fit that particular niche job.
Exactly. And if there are any problems that happen, if the employer gets found out that they haven't been paying their foreign worker the amount that they said that they were going to pay them, or they've been having them work at a different location, anything like that you don't inform the government of before you make that change, this can have major ramifications for the employer, and it could mean that they could pay a fine. They might be out of the program, out of using the temporary foreign worker program for a number of years. So they really do want to make sure that they get it right.
You're listening to The Law Show here on AM 650, talking immigration law with Katie Van Nostrand from McMillan LLP here in Vancouver. Lots still ahead. It's just warming up. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is AM 650's The Law Show. There's more of the show still ahead.